All right, so we're 1:30 on the dot, and so we will get started. And if people keep on joining us, that is wonderful. So I'm Haley Ment, and thank you for joining it for today's session. I want to read Where the People Are, Outdoor Outreach, in the Great Outdoors, presented by Sarah Bean and Elliot Harder. First, some housekeeping rules or some guidelines, if you will. We're using the chat box just for some general comments to connect with other library enthusiasts. If you are using the chat box, feel free to drop a comment to all panelists and attendees. There's the drop-down menu there. So just make sure that everyone is involved in that conversation. You can also use the Q&A box to ask our presenters a question. Our pre-recorded video is not terribly long, so we'll definitely have a lot of time for questions at the end. If you have any tech questions throughout the session or throughout our remaining time in our conference, feel free to send an email to librariesarestronger@gmail.com. And if you've missed any of our sessions throughout the day, they will be uploaded to our conference page in the next day or so, along with any attached documents that presenter had provided. So yeah, our session is I Want to Read Where the People Are, the Outdoor Outreach in the Great Outdoors. By Sarah Bean, who is a graduate of the MacEwan University Library and Information Technology program and has been proudly working in library services for a quarter of her life. She is passionate about connecting with the community, working with teens, and sharing stories. Elliot Harder, whose career is not in libraries, but in performing opera. He holds the Masters of Music from the McGill University and the Bachelor of Music from UBC, both in voice and opera performance. For this work, he brings an understanding of the importance of interconnected communities to success for everyone. He works continuously with his own community and experienced humans from all fields, including libraries, to try and improve the world around him. He joined in the world of libraries as a summer student in 2019 while working as the book bike coordinator at the Camrose Public Library. I'd also like to do a shout out to our sponsors, APLAC, the Alberta Public Libraries Administrative Council, for sponsoring the Zoom platform, and to Medaway Consulting for sponsoring this session. So let's jump in.
Medaway Consulting is an Indigenous-led consulting group.
We're passionate about improving the lives of Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples across Alberta by providing online and in-person interactive programs.
We want our participants to learn, explore, create connections, and have fun while developing a wide range of life skills through tabletop gaming, some of which incorporates positive representations of various Indigenous cultures and languages.
We also work closely with our community partners, such as the Young Alberta Book Society, Treaty 8 Urban Office, and Treaty 8 First Nations to create programs and provide support that are tailored to their specific needs, ranging from training sessions for their team members to curating the appropriate games and supplies for their community engagement events.
And in case you're wondering, Medaway means come and play in Cree.
Hello everybody, and welcome to I Want to Read Where the People Are, Outreach in the Great Outdoors. My name is Elliot Harder.
And I'm Sarah Bean. And the goal of this presentation is to begin a conversation about why outdoor outreach is important, to propose some important considerations when designing an outdoor outreach program, and to inspire you to think about the different ways that your library can serve your community. This presentation focuses on our experience at the Camrose Public Library, and it was created in partnership with Kelly Higgins and Deb Kreiderman. Our suggestions come from our experience interacting with the community of Camrose, Alberta in the summer of 2019 through outdoor outreach.
Let's just start by putting it out there. Neither of us are bikers. We joined the ranks of the Camrose Public Library summer students last year as the 2019 Book Bike team, which opened our eyes to the importance of outdoor outreach. But we definitely got better at the biking as the summer went on.
For some context, I'm a graduate of MacEwan University's Library and Information Technology program, and I've been working in libraries for 5 years as both a page and a library technician. My summer with Camrose introduced me to my love of working in small libraries and outdoor outreach.
And I am not a typical member of the library community. I am an opera singer with music performance degrees from UBC and McGill. I joined library work through my summer with the Book Bike, and it gave me a new passion for outreach work and creating access to services in outdoor settings.
To start, let's talk about the history of the Camrose Public Book Bike to frame the conversation about how to start thinking about outdoor outreach. Camrose Public Library introduced their book bike in 2015 after discovering that the majority of the people interacting with the library and its services were those who lived close to the building, and that a large portion of the Camrose community who didn't live close to the building didn't interact with the library. To combat this issue, the book bike was started to reach those who can't get to the library, and it spends its summers set up in parks around Camrose, as well as at different events to inspire community engagement. The bike also visits care facilities throughout Camrose to provide circulation and simple programming to seniors. The money for the original bike was raised through Kickstarter, community donations, and a bike-a-thon, and supplies and equipment were purchased locally when possible. As mentioned, Elliot and I worked the book bike program last summer, marking the 5th year of the Camrose Public Library book bike. In these 5 years, the bike has had a strong emphasis on programming surrounding environmentalism, sustainability, and physical literacy. The book bike's 2020 summer, however, looked quite different, as I'm sure you can imagine. The bike still went out and visited parks and partnered with community organizations, but they also implemented front porch service, biking patrons holds to them and giving front porch story times to families when needed. As well, in 2020, the book bike was given a much-needed upgrade and was fitted with an electric assist. And no, we aren't at all bitter that it happened this summer after hours.
As we've said, outdoor outreach was a new kind of concept to us when we started working with the book bike. As we planned our summer of programming, the benefits started to coalesce into real ideas that we could capitalize on in our planning. These benefits are simultaneously obvious and difficult to effectively exploit without understanding. The benefits, broadly speaking, fall into 2 categories: the benefits to your patrons and the benefits to your organization. Either of these alone could be enough for you to want to implement this type of work, but being able to look at how they function simultaneously is critical to understanding how valuable outdoor outreach truly is. Having an outdoor presence opens up a wide world for how you serve your patrons, literally. Your outdoor outreach programming acts as an extension of your library, a kind of mobile branch that allows more people to access your services. Your patrons are busy. They have lives and schedules. They have physical restrictions that keep them from getting to the buildings where you are. So it is extremely beneficial for you to go to them. By being out in the community in parks, playgrounds, markets, festivals, etc., the library becomes a part of the community that they already interact with. Bringing library services outside also invites your patrons into the outdoor spaces of your community. Some people may have social or psychological barriers to including themselves in the outdoor life of a community, and having a familiar, welcoming presence there, like the public library, may act as a bridge to exploration and inclusion. This brings us to the second major point, which is that going outside opens you up to new types of programming. You can use the wealth of resources in your community to center your programming around. Need space for an active program with kids? Meet them in the park. Need visual aids or hands-on experience for a gardening introduction for adults? Reach out to a local community garden to see if their participants might talk to your patrons. In our programming, we were able to take advantage of the many parks in Camrose, all of which provide different levels of opportunities for programming. Partnering with community organizations and making use of community amenities in your programming acts as a kind of community-based education, which is something that libraries are employing all the time. Doing this kind of work outside shifts the focus slightly to place-based education. Just as community-based education improves people's engagement and interaction with people and organizations in their community, place-based education gets people connected to the environments that they live in. It continues to foster pride in the community while focusing on helping people care about the ecosystems people live in, both natural and artificial. This includes things ranging from education about your local watershed or awareness of local plant and animal life, to using a local golf course to offer instruction on cross-country skiing or snowshoeing in the winter. It is also about understanding the histories and cultures of a place and using those as teaching tools. For example, Food systems can be taught using local farming practices or indigenous food practices in your area. Providing education in outdoor spaces has long been seen as beneficial to students and as complementary to work done in a classroom setting. There are also many documented psychological benefits to just spending time in outdoor spaces. And so, engaging with your library patrons outside becomes an easy way to bring them a service in addition to whatever you had planned for the interaction.
So these photos are some examples of some of our outdoor programming that we completed last summer. The photo on the left is a picture of our bike at Arts and Recreation in the Park, which is an event that advocates for physical and artistic activities in the great outdoors in Camrose. We packed the bike full of books about arts and physical activity, and we brought tons of crafts and sports equipment for community members to engage with. It was a super messy day. We brought too much paint and no wet wipes, and Elliot ripped his shirt, but it was a great day of inspiring people to think about how the library can support their physical and artistic endeavors. The photo on the right is a photo of Elliot giving a story time to students involved in the Battle River School Division's Reading University program, which is a summer program that takes place at the University of Alberta's Augustana campus to help students who are behind on their reading skills. We would bike the bike to them, play a game outside, usually of the tag variety, read them a story, and then they'd have solo or partnered reading time. These are just two examples of how our outdoor outreach program went to places that we already knew our community would be.
So these are great examples of how involving outdoor spaces in outreach programming can benefit your patrons. But what about how it can benefit you? Why should you care? Outdoor outreach immediately becomes an incredibly valuable marketing tool, simply by increasing the visibility of the library. The fact that people can see your library staff providing library services allows you to open dialogues with members of your community. Outdoor outreach also provides some specific marketing possibilities that aren't as possible when you are contained within your own buildings. Direct marketing, or marketing targeted at a specific individual, is something that we are all fairly used to in our online worlds. Targeted ads that use an algorithmically built profile of you to determine what you might want to buy. But at its core, direct marketing can also be seen in conversations had with your patrons and potential patrons. Through this kind of direct marketing, Sarah and I were able to use the conversations that we had with community members to find out what kinds of services they might find useful at a library, and through that, we could inform them of all the things that Camrose Public Library had that fit their needs. Sarah and I had so many instances of interacting with library patrons who were unaware of all the different library services we offered, whether through the book bike or even at the library. We were able to inform them about so much in such a brief window of conversation. But it did tell us that there was a large potential patron base that was not being tapped by the other marketing being done. Your outdoor outreach also becomes a sort of mobile billboard for your library and its services. Especially with something like a book bike, you get branding on streets through your community. But wherever you happen to set up, anyone who passes by will see your brand and be able to get more information if they stop for a chat. Outdoor outreach also opens up new social media marketing strategies. Previous years of the book bike capitalized on the novelty of the book bike itself to run an Instagram campaign of community members sitting on it. You can use landmarks, businesses, and your local parks to feature your library staff providing library service in the whole of your community. But perhaps the most valuable aspect of getting your library services outside of your building is improving community buy-in to the work you are doing. If you can make your organization relevant and beneficial to your community wherever they are, they will advocate for you, and that can be as simple as reading a story to kids in a park. We once had a patron come up to us at the farmers market and ask us when the library was going to be getting a new building and who they needed to reach out to advocate for that on our behalf.
So these pictures are just some examples of how our bike functioned as a mobile billboard for the library. Last summer, the bike got an upgrade, and Elliot and I were tasked with designing its new look. We updated the design to include the library's new brand colors, its new logo, and its new slogan. No matter what direction people saw us from, they knew who we were. Or at least they sort of did. The amount of times that we were called an ice cream bike when we clearly have the words book bike on the side is neither here nor there. The collage in the middle are some examples of the old Book Bike's marketing campaign, as Elliot mentioned, where community members could have their photo taken while sitting on the bike. These photos were then turned into a book which is able to be checked out from Parkland Libraries, called The Big Book Bike Book by Kelly Higgins. So, what can outdoor outreach look like? Well, as mentioned, our experience is with a book bike, but outdoor outreach can look like literally anything. A book bike, a bookmobile, a horse-drawn carriage, a skateboard, little free libraries, a Ford F-150, literally anything. For smaller libraries and communities, smaller scale programs might be easier than they would be in a large city. Many people already bike or walk to the areas that your program might take place in, which can be a great community engagement builder and can inspire patrons to think about physical literacy and physical health. From our experience, book bikes are a great conversation starter. Lots of people have never seen them before and are often quite interested about the make of the bike or simply just the experience of biking it. This simple act of connection with patrons can show those who don't step into your physical location that the library cares about finding them and that the library is adapting to their needs. However, smaller setups, in order to be manageable, don't have a lot of storage space and can get super heavy super quick. As well, unfavorable weather means that smaller programs often can't be outside, which limits programming and outreach opportunities to the few months of nice weather that we have here in Alberta. For larger cities, a smaller setup might not be feasible, so perhaps a van or car is the way to go. Vehicles have more storage space, which can increase the amount of programming possibilities. They can also be taken out no matter what the weather, and with the addition of a pop-up market tent, programming can carry on despite a few raindrops. However, this mode of outreach still comes with considerations about engagement and accessibility, and needs more space to be stored when it's not in use. As well, staff need a driver's license to be able to run this type of programming. Ultimately, you need to consider what best suits the needs of your community. Maybe your program is a combination of both smaller and larger setups. Maybe you have a book bike and a bookmobile, some little free libraries and a wagon, a weekly pop-up library in a park, and borrowable backpacks set up throughout your community. The possibilities are literally endless. And you can always adapt the program and any means of transportation as your community and its needs shift.
So, now that you have a bit of an idea of why you might want to do this type of work, and a few ways it might look, how do you go about actually starting an outdoor outreach program?
Well, when implementing outdoor outreach, much like any other expansion to service, the most important question you can ask is why? Why is this the best course of action for your library? The second important question to consider is what part of your services are you extending and why? Is your goal to bring programming out into the community, or is your goal to extend circulation for those who can't make it to your building? Both? What about reference? For instance, the Camrose Public Library Book Bike extends both programming and circulation, but your community may only be interested in circulation, or only outreach programming, or maybe neither. Ensure you're always tying it back to what your community needs, not what you want to do. Remember that outdoor outreach can be whatever you want it to be. There are literally no rules, and you can make it completely your own. Your method of outreach doesn't need to look like anyone else's, but it does need to best suit your goals and your community. Ultimately, it comes down to access and ensuring that we're doing our part to dismantle barriers to said access. Another key factor to take into consideration when implementing your outdoor outreach program is how you're getting the word out about said program, as we mentioned earlier. Social media is obviously a great tool for this, but so is your presence in the community. Bring your outreach program out even when the formal program isn't running. Take it to schools during the fall, have it out and about during spring break, show it off around town on the weekend to create some buzz. Take it to community events and let people take a look and ask some questions. Ask them what they want to see from the program and ask them what they think the possibilities of outdoor outreach can be. Word of mouth can be quite the marketing campaign. Just ask the school kids who would yell, "Hey, it's the book bike," when we biked past. And when in doubt, ask for help. This means asking your community what they're looking for, as well as asking other libraries with outdoor outreach programs about their processes. If you're a smaller library in a consortium, is there a way your outdoor outreach program could connect with the other libraries in your consortium? In Library Land, we love to share ideas. For more examples, check out the Association of Bookmobile and Outreach Services.
Beginning this kind of process can be a little bit daunting. and it should be. You are starting a whole new branch of work in your organization. Take the time to know what you want to accomplish by asking all those questions we mentioned so that you can understand what your goals actually are and how much time and effort it will take to keep this work going. Involve your staff, community groups, and city officials in this conversation, if you can. That way, you will have a better understanding of where work may overlap or where collaboration may be possible. One ideation method that may work very well for you is the design thinking process from Stanford's D-School. I have had the opportunity to run through a quick version of this process through a project in my master's degree, but I am by no means an expert. The D-School website has many, many resources for you to look into if you want to learn more. Roughly speaking, though, these are the steps. Start with a design challenge statement. This is a simple "how might we" question that tackles a specific problem. An example for this topic might be, how might we engage our library patrons in the outdoor spaces of our community? But you can tailor your statement however you want. Thinking about your goals will help you brainstorm what your challenge statement should be. Second, identify your target audience and learn about them. This happens through conversations, not through surveys. The goal is to understand how your audience interacts with your services, or might interact with similar things elsewhere in their lives. In design thinking, these conversations are referred to as empathy interviews, and the most important parts about them are to avoid asking leading questions and to write down as much information as you can from them. We didn't know it at the time. Sarah and I actually engaged in these types of interviews a lot last summer. I mentioned earlier that there were several patrons who we talked to about available library services. In those conversations, we spent a lot of time learning about these people's lives and thinking about what we could offer them. This is the type of conversation you can think about having when conducting empathy interviews. From these conversations, you can build individual profiles about potential patrons of your new outreach program. Hypothetically, you might talk to Francois, who has never been to your library and buys books at the local supermarket instead. He enjoys walking with his grandchildren to the playground in his neighborhood because he thinks they need to experience the real outdoors. He enjoys the park because he likes bird watching. If you were to design a custom program for Francois, you could say, "We think it would be great if Francois had more access to bird watching books to share with his grandchildren." Once you have a collection of profiles, you can start to compile the needs of your users into the most common issues. The next step is to ideate what types of services would fit the actual needs of your potential user base. The D-School website, again, has many resources on a variety of brainstorming methods to work through this process. Once you have come up with some ideas on how to serve your community, you can put one into action. You don't need to start with perfection. In fact, you will not start with perfection, and don't try. Start just small and specific. What can you get off the ground as soon as possible? Then evaluate how this attempt went and repeat it with alterations or try a different idea. Again, the Design Thinking website has a wealth of resources to learn more about this process, and they have tools to help you implement it. The benefits of this method ensure that your efforts are focused on something that your target audience might actually need, rather than just creating something that you want to provide. There are other brainstorming methods out there, but I would caution you to approach them methodically and with an open mind to failure and reattempting. The needs and abilities of your patrons and your staff will dictate what will be successful.
Now we'll talk about some important things to take into consideration when designing and facilitating your outdoor outreach program. As we mentioned earlier, partnering with community groups and organizations is a great way to expand your reach into the community. Where are the people in your community already going? What kind of things do they value? And how can the library work alongside that? What partnerships already exist among your community and the library? Fostering partnerships before the program starts and engaging in partnership even when your outdoor outreach program isn't running helps to build excitement and knowledge about the program and can result in better engagement. When you conduct your empathy interviews or ask your patrons what they want to see, do they suggest things that tie into other organizations? Try to find out who in your community would benefit from your outdoor outreach program, both in terms of individual needs and the needs of organizations and businesses in your community. As well, community partnerships are mutually beneficial. Partnerships not only allow for exciting programming opportunities, but they can inspire community members and partners to advocate for the library. If the community sees that the library cares about them and their needs, they'll be more likely to push for funding and opportunities for the library. When thinking about partnerships, tie it back to what you're hoping to extend. Circulation, programming, reference, a combination. How do community partners tie into that? For example, last summer, we focused our book bike programming on environmental literacy. So we partnered with local organizations like the Battle River Watershed Alliance, the Camrose Wildlife Stewardship Society, and NAWO Energy to provide environment-focused programming to community members of all ages. As I mentioned before, library people love to help each other and share ideas, but that love of connection doesn't have to just stay in the library world. When you ask library folk for ideas, ask your community too. These are some of the issues that we ran into last summer with the book bike and some suggestions that we made in our board report for how they could be fixed and built upon for future summers. These challenges will depend on your mode of outreach, but we felt that they were the most common challenges in our discussions with other outreach workers. Number one is engagement. We had a hard time with community engagement last summer. Our numbers were significantly lower than previous years, which can be associated with the bad weather that we encountered, but also to the lack of knowledge about the book bike and its schedule. As we've said, when planning your outdoor outreach program, account for year-round marketing. Introduce your outdoor outreach program during times of the year when you maybe wouldn't normally have it. Have your program available for patrons to check out during the off-season. Post on social media all year, getting people excited for your program and what it has to offer. Build your community partnerships early in the year and offer joint programming to build the hype for outdoor outreach. Use whatever means you have for promotion in your area to advertise and advocate for why your outdoor outreach program is worth checking out.
Number two, physical limitations. This one doesn't have a concrete answer, but more questions to consider. And again, the type of outdoor outreach you choose to focus on will have different physical limitations than others. We probably spent more time last summer biking to locations than we did providing programming. Often we would finish unpacking the bike and then have to turn around and pack it back up less than an hour later to make it to our next spot on time. Think about what you want to prioritize. Time spent programming, time spent setting up, time spent traveling. What does this mean for scheduling and program plans? How will your program be transported and stored? Does your transportation method require specific roads or paths? And how might it interact with drivers, bikers, or pedestrians?
Number three, accessibility. Accessibility is huge. For one thing, depending on the type of program you choose to go with, are you narrowing your hiring pool? A book bike, for instance, means that only people who are able-bodied and in fair physical shape and health can be hired for the role of the book biker. What does this mean for those in our field who have disabilities? Additionally, the book bike was unable to get into some of the parks in Camrose due to large hills, concrete parking blocks, and fencing. If the bike has trouble getting to these parks, that means that people with limited mobility and people with strollers are unlikely to get there, therefore limiting who can access our services, which is the exact opposite of what we want. Look into the areas that you want to provide programming in, and if they aren't accessible, choose a different area and advocate to your elected officials for accessibility to these areas. Ultimately ask, what does programming look like if we're meeting people where they're at rather than asking them to come to us?
We realize that we have not really presented ideas that will change your entire worldview about outreach. Some of these ideas may even have seemed kind of obvious as we mentioned them, but what we can say is that these ideas are things that we thought about to improve the program at Camrose after it had already existed for 4 years of being run by very intelligent and capable people. And we think they could help new programs be super successful in their first year. Outdoor outreach is a great tool for reaching sectors of your community that you typically don't. By increasing your presence outside the four walls of your building, you can improve community relationships, start partnerships, and inspire advocacy among those your library serves. Show your community that your library is here for them and that it is here to stay. Thank you. Bam.
Question?
All right, thank you so much for that. I will invite anyone to throw any questions into our Q&A box. We have our presenters live. So, and I will throw you guys a question. What would you say like your favorite part of the book bike experience was?
Ooh, what a loaded question. I loved like meeting community members and showing them that like the library is more than just the four walls. And showing them that like the library is more than just like the books on the shelf. Like lots of people were surprised because the book bike has a Wi-Fi hotspot, so we could check people's items in and out at the bike, and that blew their minds. But then even just seeing this out there like kicking a soccer ball around seemed to like blow some people's minds that a library was out in the community just like playing with kids. Yeah.
That's cool. Elliot?
I would say that building our own relationships with patrons, like outside of their relationship with the library itself. We had lots of kids who, when we would go to the farmers market, for example, there were kids who went there just to find us and see the book bike, and their parents would arrive at the farmers markets and the kids would bolt off away from their parents to try and find us. Or they would come find us at parks and just be so excited to see us and to see the library there. So.
All right, so we do have some questions rolling in, so keep those going into the Q&A and we'll get to those. The first one is, did you consider using an electric bike?
We certainly did. We showed up when the bike was already, established, but Camrose also has a bike called the Life Cycle, which is built for it's a passenger bike, so it can take people who can't necessarily bike on their own out for bike rides, and that bike has an electric assist. So we were constantly jealous of our coworker who got to drive the Life Cycle because she had no problem going up hills with the electric assist, whereas we had a bit of a struggle. So it was something we proposed to the library after our summer was over and said we should look into outfitting this for the future summers.
And then another question is, could you talk a little bit more about the design thinking process?
I certainly can. I'm not sure specifically what you want to know about it. It was something I was introduced to in this last year of my schooling. And so it is something that I'm still, trying to grapple with myself in terms of how to apply it to different things. But I think that the main thing to take away from it is that the point of the design thinking process is to come up with a problem that you are trying to solve, rather than an idea you want to implement and then trying to find the thing that solves. In doing this, you sort of save yourself a lot of hassle and a lot of expenditure on ideas that don't actually help anyone or solve a problem that exists in your community. You can go and put your effort into, right at the beginning, making sure that you understand who your user base is, you understand how they might interact with prototypes that you want to build, and how you can move from there into actual ideas that address those specific concerns, rather than just wanting to have a fun time and not solving anything with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of doing that needs assessment before you actually start doing things.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So another question is there an ice cream truck you could have partnered with?
I'm not actually aware of one in Camrose, or at least not in recent years. But that is certainly an excellent community partnership to look at if you want to implement this kind of work in your own community. Especially in the summertime, that is a great way to get people to come out. If you have an ice cream truck that has its own following, you could get people to find out about the book bike just by going to the same places they're going even once a month or twice a month kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. You have mentioned some programs, arts and story time. Did you consider some other programs?
Oh, yes. Another type of programming we did is we partnered with a summer camp in Camrose, and we partnered with them and did environmental programming. So we taught the kids about geocaching, and we did geocaching in a park, and we did some scavenger hunts with field guides, and pointed out like how to identify different plants using field guides and photos and stuff like that. What other kind of stuff other than arts and story times do we do?
Well, we talked a little bit about our partnership with Newo Energy, which is a renewable energy company in Camrose that focuses on home solar installations. And they wanted to do a couple of information sessions for the community. They reached out to us actually and invited us to come along to bring materials from the library that would help people continue this exploration on energy efficiency in their home and gathering more knowledge about alternative energy sources. And so it was super cool to have that avenue to focus on sort of adult literacy in terms of environmental literacy, but to have something that was specifically targeted at an adult audience instead of the children and youth. Because as you can imagine, a lot of the ideas that you come up with in researching this type of programming for outdoor things, a lot of it is focused on children and youth because adults for some reason don't go outside. I don't know. But there's less opportunity to interact with adults. So I guess the other thing that we did for that audience, or that kind of audience, was we partnered with a few of the seniors' homes in Camrose, and we would go and meet them outside their residences, so they could come and take a walk and just sit outside with us, and we would read stories or read poetry with them, just have a conversation, and introduce them to some of the services that the library has, like audiobooks and large print books that maybe they didn't know.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, as we all sit inside in a virtual conference on a beautiful fall day.
Exactly, yeah.
So another question, can you talk a little bit about Free Book Day?
Oh yeah, that's another thing that the bike has done for the last 5 years, is contacting publishers, particularly Canadian, and specifically, we focus more on Albertan publishers, asking for either advanced copies of books or books that they were willing to give out so that we could give out to the community for free, so that they could keep. It was a big draw. We had so many books to give away. We did a free book week, I think, instead of free book day. We had so many.
All right. So another design thinking question. So is design thinking totally incompatible with surveying patrons, or could you use it in conjunction with the more traditional stats collection that libraries need to do?
I think that you could definitely use it in conjunction as a way to identify what your target area is and how you might form your design statement. So if you, let me try to think of an example. If you are taking statistics on sort of an age range of people who use the library, for example, and you notice that there are a huge number of seniors in your community, as there are in Camrose, you can shift your whole focus on design thinking and how you might approach solving a problem towards this senior population, especially if you are worried about their mobility, as we were in our case. But if you, thinking about other stats that you might collect, if you are noticing, for example, that there are a huge number of community members who have never been to the library, say you do a survey out in the community, maybe through a local newspaper or something like that, and there's a huge percentage of your population that doesn't ever attend the library, you could focus your design thinking statement on how to engage those citizens in particular. And that might affect how you end up doing a marketing campaign, because you can't rely on the library's marketing strategies already. A library Facebook page or a library Instagram page are not going to reach those people who aren't already using your services, and so you need to come up with other ways to address that problem.
Mm-hmm. All right, so then another question is, I think you mentioned that the bike program ran this past summer. Do you know how the staff adjusted the bike service for the pandemic?
From my knowledge, it went out, I think, Elliot, would you say they went out less this summer or just?
I think they did. So the Book Bike team is part of the summer programming team at this particular library. And so because of the pandemic, they had reduced summer staff this year, and they were focused not so concretely on just the bike. They were also doing, the summer reading club and other things like that. And so because of that sort of broader scope of what they were doing, there was less opportunity for them to go out. And so that was a little bit of an adjustment for sure. And it also affected a lot of the types of programming that they were doing. I think they did a lot less planned activities with people, because there was just almost no expectation that you would get a group of people to come out to a park and want to interact with people that they didn't know. So they did, one great thing that they did was they went to cafes that have outdoor seating areas, and they would park the bike nearby those seating areas so that people could get a book and read it while they were at a coffee shop. So,
and I think I saw some Camrose people in the session, so maybe they'll throw in some comments about how they adapted this year into the chat.
Please and thank you.
Do it.
All right, so then you have mentioned that due to weather, you can only use the bike a few months of the year. Do you store the bike somewhere during the cold months?
Yes, both bikes are stored in a shed at Camrose outside of the library. So they hang out in there for the 8 months that they are not running.
The Camrose Public Library modified one of the parking stalls in sort of the staff parking area to build this shed, because they felt that, there's enough street parking in the area that losing one staff stall isn't a huge loss to them compared to what they gain by having these bikes available to them and secured and weatherproof like that. So it's a great shed that we can put the bikes in, and there's also shelves that they can store a lot of their other outdoor materials and other equipment for the bike, like a air pump for the tires and things like that. So.
All right, and our next question from an anonymous attendee: did you by chance sing during this program?
I did not. The biking up hills took a lot of my breath already. So it was not something that we did. Maybe if we had focused our programming on arts literacy or something else, I might have found ways to incorporate that. But we really did try. I guess, yeah, I could have.
All right, so how many staff do you think would be needed or necessary to run such a program?
Well, so Camrose, when we were there at least, for the summer student program, had 6 summer students, 2 of which focused on the summer reading program, like providing programming at the library, 2 of which provided programming for the bike, 1 of which was our social media coordinator, and 1 of which was the life cycle and intergenerational programmer. But we found that even just 2 people going out for the bike sometimes was hard, because biking in itself was difficult. One person bikes the book bike, and then one person bikes on their own bike to provide assistance. But sometimes you might need that third person if the bike's super heavy, or if you end up going to a park where there's a lot of people and you're being pulled in multiple directions. So I think we had suggested that we had suggested adding one extra person to the book bike team so that it was a team of 3, I think. Would you say, Elliot?
I think that's what I remember writing. I don't
It
know.
was many moons ago.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Especially dealing with crowds of people on a busy farmers market day, for example. There's just a lot of people coming at you from different directions. The kids who are coming up need special kinds of attention. Some of them might want a story read to them, and that completely eliminates one of your bikers or one of your programmers who can no longer work with other members of the public who are coming up for the duration of that book. And so that really effectively limits or cuts your workforce in half if you only have 2 people with the bike. So 3 people really works well if you plan to go to busy areas. 2 people if you're still exploring what your region can offer in terms of engagement would absolutely be fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, so what might be a good way to keep outdoor outreach active during the colder months of the year?
This is something that we talked about a lot in terms of like getting people excited for the months when your program might be running. Is one thing we had talked about doing was partnering with like a local bike shop in the spring or like late winter, early spring to get people excited for the biking season. So taking the book bike out during the winter, not necessarily biking it, but having it in the library for people to see if they've never seen it before. And doing like a bike tune-up workshop so that you can figure out how to best keep your bike in shape for the summer months, I guess. But also just like continuing that partnership of going to the seniors homes. That doesn't necessarily have to be with the bike, but that can be with doing a pop-up library at the seniors homes, or doing, if it's a nice winter day, doing a pop-up event out in a park in the snow, encouraging people to still be active and be engaged in the environment during those months. That's what I got off the top of my head. Elliot, do you have anything?
I was going to just build off of the last thing you mentioned about doing a pop-up in a park on a nice winter day. You know, winter is cold, but everyone or most people have, you know, a nice winter jacket. They've got toques, they've got mitts. We can spend time outdoors and often try to. And so you can drive a little folding table and some collections of books to a park where maybe it's at the top of a sledding hill or the bottom of a sledding hill. Or you can go to a trail that people use for cross-country skiing or horseshoeing or snowshoeing rather. You can take it if there's a winter festival in your area. Those kinds of places where people are already spending time outdoors, if you try and capitalize on that presence of your community members, it doesn't necessarily need to be exactly the same as what you do in the summer. Don't bring the bike. Bring a sign that has the bike logo or photos of the bike so that they understand that what you're doing is connected to that program. But just engage with them wherever and whenever you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then kind of a follow-up question is, do you know if the Camrose Public Library did any outdoor outreach in the winter or without the bike?
I'm not personally aware of any that they did this last year, but you know, there's a winter every year, so we'll see what happens.
Again, Nicole, if you have any input on that, I'm not too sure. I would love to see it. Just in general, libraries everywhere, I would love to see that more often.
And there are some comments in the chat if you guys want to go and read those about what Camrose did this year.
Mm-hmm.
And so then one of our last questions, unless there are more that come in, what would you say is the weirdest or most unexpected thing or day you experienced on the book bike?
Ooh.
No pressure.
Elliot, do you have anything off the top of your head?
Nothing in particular is coming to mind.
The first thing that came to my mind was we went to a senior's home one day and we were just simply sitting outside. We had the bike set up and an older gentleman came up and he pulled 2 hard candies out of his pocket, set them on the table and said, thank you for your service and walked away. That wasn't that weird, but that just sticks out in my mind.
Things like that make it fun to work in a library, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Patron interactions are always exciting and interesting, and you don't know who you're going to meet, especially when you're out in the community like that. There was a group of kids who would come and find us almost every day that we were out and around, and frequently it was just the older sibling watching the younger ones, and they would come up to us and ask for a new page of stickers every single time they saw us, even though it was the same page of stickers they had every day.
Another question that came in is, were there opportunities to partner with other community organizations that provided children's programming?
Yeah, so the summer camp that we talked about, where we did the geocaching project with them, was an excellent resource for children's programming in Camrose. We partnered with the Battle River Watershed Alliance, who were in the midst of planning sort of a 3-day summer camp of their own about watershed literacy. And so they had already prepared a bunch of activities for kids to do. And so they came out with us one day, just to a little part of Camrose where there's access to, it's sort of a man-made lake. There's a creek that has a dam on it. And we went bug dipping in that lake with a bunch of kids. So just using a net to bring up whatever we can, and then trying to explore what it is and identifying different creatures that live in our local watershed. So, kids find bugs cool, so they enjoyed that.
Awesome.
Any other thoughts you had, Sarah?
I'm trying to think back with who else we partnered with.
I mean, we did work with the Summer Reading Club at the library as well, which sort of operates as its own program at the library, separate from the Book Bike. So we did a Books and Bikes program with them every Wednesday, where all the kids could bike to the library and meet us there, and then we would bike as sort of a row of ducks to a playground in the area, bringing all of our books with us and all kinds of games and toys for them to play with.
Yeah, and we didn't do it, but other years they partnered with, who does the yoga, Elliot?
Sacred Arts.
Sacred Arts, and they would provide programming called Yoga in the Park, and that was geared towards families and children, I believe, right? Yeah,
so it was an opportunity, usually over sort of a lunch hour, where parents could come and practice a short yoga session, have some meditation practice in a nice outdoor setting, and the Book Bike would be there for people who needed a little bit of supervision for their kids within the same area, so we could read stories to them or do quiet games so that it wasn't too distracting to the people practicing yoga nearby.
And then another question that came in is, where did you find the resources to help with environmental literacy programming, apps, books, items, etc.?
It was a lot of Google searching. I think that was a lot of what we spent our planning on, was trying to identify ways that we could incorporate this into the type of programming we were doing. As the summer progressed, we sort of realized that having really structured kinds of programs just doesn't work well with a book bike, because you have no guarantee of how many people you're going to be meeting. So you can't plan for, oh, there's going to be enough people for a team game for us to do here. You can't plan for even enough people to do a paired off activity. So it really has to be a lot of one-on-one individual things that you can plan for. But for some of the partnerships that we did, we had a better idea of what our attendance was going to be. So for example, with the Reading University kids, we tried to plan games that would answer questions about environmental literacy, such as things about how food chains work. So we designed a tag game where there's predators and there's prey, trying to compete for space in a habitat, And then we would adjust the game according to different changing variables. So for example, a logging company comes in and removes some of the habitat. How does that change the balance between the predators and the prey? So that was a lot of sort of just finding games that exist in the world and trying to adjust them however we needed to get a specific message across. As far as apps are concerned, we just downloaded whatever geocaching apps we could find for that project, as well as there's an app called Seek that is produced by iNaturist, and that is an iPhone app that helps you identify plants just by using your iPhone camera to look at the leaves and the berries. So that was what we used to build a scavenger hunt, where kids could use field guides or a field guide that we printed off from photos to help identify the plants in the area. Anything you can think of, Sarah?
I think that is pretty much it. It was a lot of Google searching and a lot of finding programming that other like environmental groups or like environmental people who do primarily environmental programming, looking and seeing what they were doing and seeing how we could alter that for a library or for the book bike.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think we had some really great questions and a lot of great conversation. And thank you to all of our attendees who stuck it out for a Friday afternoon. I personally really appreciate you guys spending time with me and our conference planning committee. And I hope you guys stick around for our next keynote, our final keynote, and our closing comments at the end of the day. And everybody have a great weekend.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.